Hey everyone, Alex Terrace here. If you want to check out who I am, what I do, you'll see my LinkedIn below in this YouTube video. And essentially, what I do is I help business owners in the wellness industry, practitioners, and also just people at home figure out and navigate the health space. And it's really confusing, and some of this equipment can be quite costly. So I try to help people to avoid wasting their money, getting scammed, and finding the real wellness equipment that is capable of delivering actual therapeutic outcomes. So in this video, we will be reviewing a negative ion generator that's current best in the industry. And this one, as you can see in the photos here, as they do the little slideshow, can be applied in multiple ways. And we're going to dive in to this really amazing modality, this therapeutic. There's really only a few devices actually out there that deliver a huge flow of negative ions, even though negative ion therapy is actually one of the better substantiated or studied types of therapeutic functions. And it started decades ago with evaluating and looking at negative ion exposure in the air. And this again started a long time ago. I'm sure some of you have even heard about negative ions out in nature, or negative ions, next to a waterfall or by the ocean, ocean air, right? And people get those salt lamps and things like that. So most people are aware, of negative ions. Yeah, I think I've heard something like that, right? And you also get those air purifiers, right? Supposedly that produce different types of ions and stuff like that. So it's been around for a while. But a lot of people very few people really, and including health practitioners, are just not aware of actually how well substantiated, proven the clinical therapeutic outcomes are. Of course, it has to be the right type of application with negative ions. So that requires, first and foremost, the right quantity or stream of ions. Okay, so the more the concentration per minute or per second of ions that you're getting, then you can actually produce certain types of therapeutic outcome. And so, in other words, negative ions are all around us, and some places may be more rich and abundant, and some will have so little that actually there's consequences to human health. And while we are very familiar with, negative ions being in the air and, air purifiers and stuff like that, again, there's very few options if you want to get actually a highly concentrated stream or source, energy source of negative ions into the body and to replenish what the body really, really needs, but is usually deficient in, based on, I guess you could just say, modern day living and a lot of the other environmental stressors. So really, honestly, external stressors and all of the internal ones too that create a much, much greater need for more negative ions. So if you have any questions about this product, including where to get it, where to get a good deal on it, and we will actually go into this specific one, then you just reach out directly, email me. I'll put you in touch with the main person who does all the clinical training and handles all the sales and stuff like that for the manufacturer based in the United States. And that would be my best recommendation. Of course, if you want to email me and say, hey, here's my situation, would this be appropriate for me or not? I do consult and advise on many different product categories, many different types of equipment and modalities, and I can definitely guide you, including that while this is an amazing standalone therapeutic technology, of course, there are other things that could be done as adjunct therapies or as part of a protocol to give ultimately a better outcome. So that's another reason to reach out. You just say, I am this type of individual, or these are the types of things I'll be treating. What would you recommend in terms of how I could even further enhance the effects of this negative ion therapy? And that's what I do. And I don't really charge anything for that type of advice or guidance. Again, my email address, fit4reviews@gmail.com, is below in the description of the video. So let's move into more photos, because everybody loves photos. So let me just expand this really quick here. All right, so here is, again, just kind of like another example of it can be adjusted, this arm, and we're going to dive into the research in a second here, by the way. Just want to make sure everybody got a good visual of it before we dive in further. And so at the end here, you see like these little output ports, and that's actually where the stream of negative ions is coming from. And it's huge. It's well over 1 million ions that are flowing through this totally, and this arm is, again, obviously adjustable, as you'll see in further photos. In this photo right here, we're actually doing kind of like a treatment for a chest condition. And I'm not going to use the word, but negative ion therapy is good for many different things. And honestly, there's a lot of things in the chest, and you can kind of read between the lines, that could benefit greatly. There's a lot of different organs in there, right? You've got your heart, you've got breasts, you've got lungs, right? And negative ions, one of the benefits is that these ions are so small that they can easily pass through the body. And part of that is also due to biophysics, like the electromagnetic induction and how all that works. And there's a few good books actually I'll recommend if you just want to get up to speed on kind of how the body is electromagnetic. But anyways, it can pass through clothes. If anybody was wondering, it can easily pass through clothes as well, negative ions. So obviously in these photos, people are wearing clothes. So there's different, ways that you can adjust this depending on what you're treating in a localized fashion. Now, I just want to point something out. In the case of really both of these, say you're aiming a little bit at the face or kind of the back of the neck or the head, maybe they happen to have a condition, that's more in that area that you're looking at treating. But the way that once the ions get into the body, really honestly, they're going to be going everywhere that the body wants to send them, where there's an actual need, let's just call it a cell voltage need, a need for those ions. So once it gets in the body again, you have plenty. There's a huge, massive amount of them where it's just going to go wherever it's needed. And it's kind of up to your body's intelligence for that. Now, of course, if, say, this person has cervical or some sort of neck issue, would sending more of the ions there first help? Yeah. And it just happens to do with, when somebody comes in, we want to get them the results, if possible, as quickly as possible for the obvious reasons. So sure, treat there instead of, your knee or her gut, right? If there's more of like a neck issue, right? So obviously we're going to treat there first. But again, that's the beauty of something like this. If you have enough quantity of ions, you're going to always have a systemic effect. So yeah, oh my gosh, my neck is so much better now. But, I'm also getting all these other benefits. And that's kind of really cool. There's not a lot of modalities, I would say, that are out there where it can have more of a true whole body systemic effect. But when you have the opportunity to invest in something like that, obviously the ROI is just way, way, way better. And even just the marketing potential, say you're a business, you don't have to say like, oh, we only treat, this specific condition with this $30,000 device. Now this device is not $30,000, it's way under that. But you see what I'm saying? If you can invest in something that's pretty good price, that has broad efficacy, oh my gosh, you can definitely get an ROI. Now you're just marketing to this condition or this health goal or this or this or this. And then before you know, it's like, oh, you're marketing to a dozen different types of patients or avatars. Incredible for gym recovery. And again, as long as you're just replenishing the whole body, you could go top down like this. He might have done a whole body workout. He might have been working out his lower legs. It doesn't really matter what part that athlete was pushing themselves with. They're going to get a huge, huge replenishment, and it's going to go and run through the entire body. Now, granted, some elite athletes, they might also enjoy focusing the treatment, on specific parts of the body, depending on where they need it the most to get a little bit of a slightly faster recovery, but just kind of another example. The cool thing is you can just, again, adjust this in so many different ways. So yeah, you want to lay it on a massage table. You want to sit in a zero gravity chair, or you want to pair this. Now, like for example, if you're on a massage table, there's at least, if you're creative, 2 to 3 additional modalities that are not contraindicated, would be complementary, that this person could be doing simultaneously at the same time as getting the negative ion rain treatment to further enhance. So if you got somebody there for 20 minutes, 30 minutes or whatever, might as well use that time, right? They're taking that time out where you could stack a few other complementary modalities and get a much, much better outcome on the other side. And that's also how you get your highest retention rate. People come out of that experience like, oh my God, you know what I mean? Like, I want more of that. Don't get me wrong, this is an amazing modality that people feel on its own, but when you can stack, that just also increases usually the outcomes. And again, people will come back. You have a higher chance. Retention rates from a business perspective, obviously, is something important to pay attention to. So let's close this out here. And before we move into more of the research, jump on Amazon, and if you're just not familiar with biophysics, the body, and its electromagnetic aspects, as it applies to physiology, metabolism, and everything. One of the most popularized books in the last decade is from Jerry Tennant. Okay, and he was affiliated and connected to the TENS device. Everybody's heard of that TENS device. Anyways, so the only thing that frustrates me about this guy and his book, which is pretty thick, by the way, there's a lot of value in here, is that he doesn't give any credit to who? Scrolling down here, he doesn't give any credit really to Dr. Robert Becker, and sure Gary Selden too, but mainly Dr. Robert Becker. And Dr. Robert Becker, this book came out, much prior. As you can see, this version of it, 1998. But Robert Becker was doing research even much prior, even in the 70s, and going into the early 80s. He was doing a lot of research with ions and just different types of electromedicine type of research and applications. He almost won a Nobel Prize. Okay, so that's saying something, just because of his pioneering research. He was like regrowing limbs and doing some crazy stuff on different types of animals. So take a look at both of these books, and they're just really good summaries to get the foundational knowledge of, in other words, once you skim and get through aspects of either of these books, honestly, you're going to immediately understand, oh yeah, negative ions is such a simple concept to understand why this would be good, good for you. And keep in mind, too, that these books are older, and it's not like the research ended 2010, there's been no more further research. There's always continuing research in the field of electromedicine. And if you're a practitioner watching this, or just somebody with a lot of chronic health conditions, and you really haven't dabbled in electromedicine and really are familiar with biophysics, and how important it is in terms of achieving better therapeutic outcomes, you're missing out on a lot. A huge amount of things. You can only go so far with, lifestyle and supplementation, nutraceuticals, peptides, things like that. You can only go so far. That can take you very far, don't get me wrong, if you really know how to dial it in. But you can get somebody there a heck of a lot faster, and sometimes resolve things in a much better way, sometimes just get better outcomes, by including electromedicine type of therapeutic equipment and devices in conjunction with your additional protocols. So let's dive into now the research. And right in my description box of my YouTube video down below, or you might see this on another social media platform as well, I'm actually going to put a link to this entire super researched, deep researched negative ion report, let's just call it that, negative ion therapy report. So the link again is right below. You can go grab it, and when you grab it, it'll just send a request to me to share it, like a sharing permission, and I will try to share it with you as fast as possible, so then you can download it and enjoy it, use it, share it, whatever you want to do. But it compiles a lot of research studies in here that go back for quite some time. And we're going to review just like some of these today, just so you can kind of get a sense and also get a little bit excited about, like, oh my gosh, this is like a really super legitimate therapy that maybe I should look into including in my practice or at home. And again, there are a lot of modalities and equipment out there that is awesome, and I specialize in helping people to find those things. And I would just tell you once again that when you look at the hundreds and hundreds of different wellness tools out there and products, a lot of them are more niched out. Their therapeutic scope of action is a little bit more narrow or precise, and they do very specific things. What I always recommend at the beginning, whether you're a wellness business or just somebody at home trying to build a home sanctuary, usually the first things that are good to invest in are therapeutic tools that have a very wide degree of therapeutic efficacy. So in other words, they're offering something to the body, facilitating something for the body that is very foundational to health. So again, if you don't know, that's what the books are for, and or reading the studies, because actually a lot of the study overviews will teach you a lot too that you'll see here in the report. When you understand the role of negative ions on a cellular level, then you realize, oh, okay, this is like really foundational to core functions. Like everybody's heard of ATP, right? And mitochondria, right? The electron transport chain. What's an electron, right? Just to want to keep it like super simple right now. What's an electron? Okay, that's a negative ion. So yes, absolutely. Does it feed into those systems? Yes, when you get an abundance of additional negative. So you can start to see it's affecting core cellular functions. It is very anti-aging. It's very regenerative and a whole lot more. And it's just one of those adjunct therapies where it's like, does it help with this? Yes. Could it help with this also? Yes. Usually, if you ask a question, could it help with? The answer is going to be yes. Now, there's other modalities out there, not many, where it will pretty much help because it's so foundational to cellular health. It'll pretty much help with almost anything. The more of these negative ions you even get to in your body, or if there's a balanced ratio, let's just say, between negative, positive in the body, protons, electrons, things like that. Because there always has to be a ratio and a balance, okay? But most people are shifted in some respects in certain processes more to too much proton side, imbalanced, skewed ratios. It's very complex when you get into why. But it's one of those things that's supportive with so much. So let's dive into it, okay? So one thing here is there's been a lot of studies with improvements in sleep quality and insomnia. And by the way, if you're a practitioner and you're going through this presentation, you're going to get a lot of marketing ideas actually. And regardless of your profession, you're going to realize like, oh my gosh, I can help these types of clients. Oh, I could help these types of patients. Like I could literally market for, hey, you got sleep problems. Hey, you got a seasonal affective disorder. Come on in, right? Your first couple sessions, they're 50% off. You get the idea? And so sometimes there's some wisdom in that. If you know the efficacy or the outcomes are really good for certain conditions, would it make sense to market to those people? Obviously, because statistically, for most of them, you're gonna for sure probably be able to give them a good outcome. And if you want to make absolutely sure before they invest a bunch of money with you, that's what I just told you how to do. Give them a free session or give them 50% off. Be generous first couple times. If you have really good equipment, statistically, they're gonna probably feel better and notice some improvements in those first couple sessions. So it's okay. It's okay to give them that discount. Just get them in your door any way that you possibly can. And then, yeah, I'm feeling better now. It's going to be easier to upsell them on a package, okay? So sleep quality, insomnia, if you look at the statistics, it's abysmal. It's really depressing on how many people have sleep issues. And you can go do a quick AI search or Google on this. I think it might have been like 85%, or it was something insane last time I looked at it in the United States and some other I think it was mainstream countries, and some of the bigger countries were leaders in that. In terms of the statistics, it was bad, real bad. Quality sleep is so essential for literally everything when it comes to health and performance and you name it, quality of life. So if the only thing this device did potentially was just help your sleep quality, it would be absolutely 100% worth it. Because there's not that many modalities out there that have a really dramatic effect on sleep, okay? So anything that improves sleep, in my book, is priceless and sometimes can stack well together. So this is pretty serious right here. 79% success rate, okay? With insomnia exposed to... Insomnia is quite a complex process too. It's like, oh, this is the cause of insomnia. It's like, that's the whole problem, or challenge, I should say, with insomnia. It's a combination of factors to really crack the code on it and get results for people. So to just have across the board such a solid rate, that's like an inverse way of proving to you, like, this really is deeply systemically affecting people. It's complex. Stuff going on in your gut could be. Stuff going on in your endocrine system. Stuff going on in your nervous system. Different parts of your nervous system. Different parts of your brain. It's like, it could be a real pain in the ass, honestly, to untangle. Why am I having sleep issues? Depending also on your age. That can complex things. So that's like nothing to sneeze at. That's no joke right there. You should already be sold on the modality just from that, if you know anything about how complex sleep issues can become, okay? Now, can you probably improve the success rate here? That's what I was saying before. Yeah, absolutely. There's some additional things out there that are great for sleep. So this is just a standalone, okay? And if you actually dive into like this study, for example, I'm so sorry I don't have the citation on this. You can actually look it up by the bias the statistics here and easily find it because it tells you the journal and stuff like that. In my list of, by the way, the rest of the studies in this report, I have a massive amount of citations, so don't worry about it. You'll find plenty of things, okay, with citations where you can immediately hit the hyperlink. But anyways, it's helping regulate melatonin, lowering cortisol. This is super significant. This major impacts on health over time. And this is when exposed to negative air ions. So the most impressive thing I can tell you is, as you scroll through the studies, and I'll try to shut up and try to make some progress here, is what is the craziest thing about this is as you become more and more impressed and sold on, oh my gosh, negative ions is like pretty legit. A lot of these impressive findings are on a certain minimal threshold, not even that much, of negative ion ratio in the air that our people are inhaling through their lungs, going into their bloodstream. By the way, that's how it works, okay? When it's in the air, I should say. So in other words, what I'm saying is to get a lot of the impressive therapeutic outcomes with negative ion therapy, a good chunk of the studies was from higher concentrations in air. In other words, yeah, that is a helpful, good way to get it in the body. Is that the absolute best way therapeutically to get it in the body? No, it is absolutely not. So this is extremely exciting. Do you know what kind of significant outcomes this is right here from just getting it in the air? Okay, so in other words, could we do a better job than this? Yeah, probably. If we gave a better exposure, like to the areas and the organs that matter with sleep regulation. Isn't the thyroid involved in this? Yeah. Isn't the brain involved in this? Yeah. Isn't the adrenal glands involved in this? What if we could give a stronger flow of ions, a higher amount than they used in the studies, directly to the adrenal glands, directly to the thyroid, directly to the brain? You get what I'm saying now? Okay? With a tool like this, where you can actually concentrate on these regions. Oh, maybe you did some lab panels and you know that somebody has already some issues with the thyroid, which, by the way, controls 60% of body voltage, the thyroid gland. And some of the best practitioners I know have tracked in women, maybe because there's a couple that I know specialize in women, 95% having suboptimal thyroid function, 95% when you properly do comprehensive labs. Okay, not just a thyroid panel, because if you do most thyroid panels, a lot of times you're going to miss that there's actually an issue there, FYI. Okay. So, yeah, moving on. Anxiety and stress reduction. Statistics today on anxiety and stress. Okay, we don't even have to go there, right? This is like so super widespread. But again, it's for a lot of the same issues. You're affecting the endocrine system in multiple ways. That's why it's actually working. Inflammatory markers, it's having an effect on, it's kind of a few different routes, inflammation, to how it's affecting stress and anxiety, okay? The other thing is that negative ions feed are, let's say, an important part of regulation or balance in the autonomic nervous system between sympathetic response and parasympathetic response. You could say that for certain reasons, because there's a buildup in proton, acid, and imbalances, and I mean, it's a lot of things. It's everything from like mineral deficiencies to all kinds of stuff. But basically, a body needs to shift back into parasympathetic. It's later in the day based on circadian biorhythms, but they literally have part of the reason is an insufficiency in negative ions and electron flow to actually make that shift over. Okay, so they stay more in a hypoxic, oxidative or imbalanced redox, acidic or systemic acidosis state. So again, as I said, it's super complex how all these things are interconnected. So cognitive performance and memory, this was a really interesting one because pure air, quality air, is kind of related to this whole equation here and the health of your blood and stuff like that. And also a lot of people live in low oxygen environments. In other words, they're higher in CO2, especially like office spaces. I mean, it's part of the reason why going for a walk in nature is so good. You know, why oxygen levels in cities. It's a combination of both the particulate, the pollution, more CO2 from all the exhaust, stuff like that. You get the idea. Less trees, less plants. Anyway, so this was a study that kind of looked at all that with like higher CO2, essentially 500 parts per million of it. It's a higher ratio, which again is something that's very relevant for, honestly, probably a couple billion people based on their living situation. Okay. And so they just took a look at including negative ions in the air and kind of how that shifted things. So actually, in an environment that was actually much, much higher in CO2. And yeah, basically counteracted some of the cognitive decline from that, let's just say, poor air quality, which again is a combination of particulates, higher CO2, things like that. Cardiovascular health, this is just, one citation, but there's been a lot of other additional cardiovascular studies. If you do HRV analysis and you have like actually legitimate equipment, because there is a bunch of different HRV out there that's totally bogus bullshit in terms of what they show you on their software. But if you're pretty skilled with it and you have a good system, you can absolutely find some real readings and shifts and changes by doing proper negative ion therapy ahead of time and then doing some HRV analysis. HRV is a very super legit, great path to go down and include as a practitioner. Pretty well established, at this point. And again, you just might not really know that negative ions will have a really powerful effect. And again, this is drilling down specifically, okay, on what the negative ions were doing to actually help improve your HRV. And so this is interesting, right? Because this is such a perfect example of like how much the internet is great for educating, and honestly offline conferences and stuff like that about so many subjects. But then when we get into like, okay, well, I want to improve that aspect of now what we're diagnosing or measuring, okay, in the body, it's harder to come across that information, which is why I do what I do. So plenty of people have heard about HRV, but if you were like, hey, what are some of the most effective direct ways to improve it? Suddenly people are a little quieter. They're like, well, there's lifestyle and, there's just like, it's just not as clear, right? And of course we could rate the things out there like good, better, best, right? In terms of what's actually going to improve HRV the most and the most quickly. Negative ion therapy is one of the more direct, faster ways to improve HRV, okay? And there's a whole interconnection because of that, because of the role of electrons in the central nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, the vagal system, and how all that connects, obviously, with the heart. Okay, and negative ions are a big, big part of what feeds into those systems, literally electromagnetically. All right, fatigue and energy levels. Okay, and again, these are all the different aspects of how it's improving those things. Okay. Reducing exhaustion that develops with positive ion exposure. People don't realize that when you're exercising, you start to have a higher ratio or a more of a abundance production of protons. It's technically hydrogen protons. This is also why I'm such a fan of hydrogen therapy. It's really like negative hydrogen, okay, that you're inhaling or drinking. Hydrogen also, for many similar reasons here. It has a very, very broad therapeutic efficacy. If you need any guidance on hydrogen, I'm your guy. I've been in that industry almost since the beginning. It enhances aerobic metabolism, increases oxygen utilization efficiency. Okay, so again, when you start to learn more about negative ions, you're starting to now think like, would there be some synergy, some complementary aspects to how this modality, okay, or this equipment that I'm recommending would enhance maybe hyperbaric oxygen therapy or exercise with oxygen therapy? See? Yeah, absolutely. And could you take it even a step further and a step further and a step further? Yes, you can. There's even further things. Might affect for example, the carrying capacity of hemoglobin, for that oxygen. That there's products and therapeutics out there, including negative ion therapy that helps you with that. Okay. It's all very fascinating stuff. Affects your lactate function, the production of that after exercise. Anyways, moving on. Wound healing. The cool thing about this device, is that you can, of course, aim it wherever you want. right? So of course, if you're going to have like a wound or some kind of even localized serious acute injury or whatever in a specific part of your body, well, you just have the person sit in a chair or lay down or whatever, and you're going to send a massive amount of ions into that specific area. Okay? Anti-inflammatory actions, reducing interleukin 1A, 1B, IL-6, the nasty IL-6, which is so interconnected with so many different conditions. Pretty cool, right? All right. Now, a lot of times when people talk about like, well, how am I going to affect like these different interleukin, cytokines and blah, 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 blah. In most practitioners, they're thinking like, oh, well, you could take this drug, right? It's pharmaceutical. Oh, or you could take this specific supplement, right? Do you understand now the role of electromedicine? So let's say you took that supplement or you took that peptide. I love peptides. Don't get me wrong. Love peptides. Or you took, a nutraceutical, another type of supplement or whatever. But you can always ask the question, what is the dosage, right? What's the dosage of how much I need to take to maybe act on IL-6, right? It's a great question. How long do I have to take it for before it has what amount of effect on the body? Okay. It's having, the way that those things are working is more of a indirect downstream effect. Okay. When you do something like just direct negative ion energy, that's having a like top-down effect, an upstream effect that cascades down. Okay? So it's a much more immediate, direct way to affect these things. It's a more immediate, direct way to affect antioxidant levels, to basically affect redox functions, versus like, I'm going to eat an apple, or I'm going to take the supplement, turmeric, curcumin, or quercetin. Get the idea? Okay, that's a much longer process, indirect process, for that to affect your body. Those are great things, great, good to do. But it's an indirect way that eventually starts to have effects, let's say, on different antioxidant productions. Maybe glutathione, right, or SOD or whatever. You get the idea, right? But when we get into like, okay, but endogenously, how's the body going to produce more SOD? Or endogenously, what's going to mimic or amplify or help recycle something like glutathione? Okay? Or even recycle something like vitamin C better. So again, negative ion therapy can feed into all those existing processes and those organs that are responsible. So you'll see in some other studies further down about utilizing negative ions for affecting different things in the liver. Okay, well, doesn't the liver also play a really tremendous role in a lot of some of the most powerful antioxidants that the body produces? Yes. So if you can improve liver function in a more direct way with negative ion therapy, you can improve pretty much all kinds of processes in the body because the liver is so freaking important. But you can absolutely improve the production quality or output of some of those endogenous antioxidants for the body. Again, it's in a very direct way. An indirect way to do it is to take like milk thistle extract. Get what I'm saying? Nutritionally, nothing can replace nutrition, obviously. So like, does your liver still, really want and need glycine and L-cysteine amino acids? Yeah, 100%. Are most people deficient or need more? Absolutely, 100%. Something as simple as having amino acid deficiencies is a widespread issue. So yeah, I'm not saying like, you don't have to eat anything when you do negative ion therapy, No, but if you actually understand some basics of nutrition, you can make this negative ion therapy extremely better, way more effective. So that's why, yeah, everything still all matters. And then as you add in a tool like this, you're going to get tremendously better outcomes, for maybe, say, a liver issue or improved redox status systemically. So yeah, try to do everything right. Again, this is why it's an adjunct therapy. Okay? Here's a fun study. Tai Chi exercised combined with negative ion inhalation, okay? Actually affecting cholesterol and blood lipids. Do you see? And it's like, oh my gosh, wow, what does this not do? Yeah, because You can't say, Alex, oh, negative ions are not involved, in these processes or these substances or these tissues. No, no, no. It's everywhere. It's involved in everything. Get it? That's why this modality is so awesome, why it's so powerful, why it's a great adjunct therapy for everything. So that's why you can't say like, well, what about this in the body? What do you think my answer is going to be? Are negative ions or electrons involved over there with that? Yes. Okay. So then you know the answer to that. So no, there's not thousands and thousands and thousands of studies. Costs money and it takes time, but there could be. They could do tens of thousands of studies on negative ions if they wanted to, and just evaluate absolutely everything. Computer office work syndromes. This is such an important one because the problem is a lot of times you're in office space or a small room, air quality suffers. There's studies on sitting for a while. And when you look up what actually is the consequences to sitting for a while, you realize, I get it. Yep. I can see how there's a buildup, what ends up being a buildup in positive hydrogen protons. Okay, acidic levels as tissues back up and flow, stagnate. I get it. Interesting. Part of moving the body is ensuring that you're actually creating your negative ions and maintaining good energy flow from an electron standpoint. But then you also get bombarded with radiation a lot of times with certain sorts of computer and electronic setups, which is why also grounding yourself while you're working in some sort of offices or in certain types of computers, or especially if your hand is touching your laptop pad as well, you might want to put a grounding pad under your wrist. Now you're starting to understand the connections between like, oh, okay, earthing or grounding. Isn't that woo-woo? No, actually go check out grounding and earthing studies. There's absolutely a bunch of really legitimate studies now that have gone on for a few decades, if you didn't realize. It's been quite some time now. And there's some really, really solid research studies. And then when you look into, well, what's this whole earthing thing about? What's grounding about? We're literally now talking about the exact same subject. So if you read a couple of his books, body electric, voltage, electromedicine, you just start to understand these things. It's going to be like, oh, okay, now this is extremely easy for me to understand why something like grounding would be good for so many different things in the body. Because when we start to talk about grounding and how that all works, it also comes down to electron flow, okay? And how much, and just basically ensuring that your body can maintain optimal ratios of protons and electrons. When I say protons and electrons, yes, that is broad. It's supposed to be broad because we could dial down and get even more granular about it and be like, well, calcium, ions or, magnesium of this charge or this type of potassium. And, you could get into mineral electrolytics. It does get very complex when you get into what are the charge. Because obviously electrons and protons, they make up all kinds of different compounds. You get what I'm saying? So then you could even drill down further and get like, what are those compounds, right? And is it a positive charge or is it a negative charge? In other words, this is really foundational stuff. Where imagine now if you're affecting the ratio of like how much potassium is inside your cell. You get what I'm saying? Because of charge potential or transmembrane potential, which once again is about protons and electrons. So again, this is all very, very foundational stuff. Everything starts to interconnect when you really get into biophysics and electromedicine and how the body really works. But yeah, grounding, if you don't understand that, it's all interrelated when you get into like grounding pads. Here's just kind of like a summary table of just a few different things. Complete fatigue disappearance, 100% in some studies. And by the way, let's just keep scrolling down here because I'm actually going to wrap up the video. This is where we get into like, I would love to go over all of these, all the different psychiatric studies on mood, emotional regulation, impressive things they found that are published in psychiatric brochures. I mean, not brochures, but journals. But you'll see negative ion research in all kinds of different journals. You'll see some with massive amounts of studies starting from 1957. There's tons of different meta-analyses. That's just 33. There's meta-analyses that have gone into 187 studies that you see cited in here. Okay, so we know a lot. we know that 100%, 200%, we are very confident in general in the field of health and medicine that negative ion therapy can have a profound effect. Okay, but there definitely, if you want better outcomes, you have to make sure that there is a high density of exposure. Okay? What's interesting is there is some products out there that have a lower density of exposure, and people still get results from them. It's great, right? It's not going to harm you. You still get results. But if you want the most optimum functions for the widest amount of conditions in a shorter period of time, so basically the most efficient treatment times, yeah, you do want to stick with something that's going to be basically somewhere of 1 to 2 million ions, okay, production. And by the way, I just want to make a sidebar comment is don't be confused once again. Check this out. FDA and EPA warnings. Some negative ion generators produce ozone as a byproduct, okay? So absolutely, don't just get online and be like, ion producers for the air. I'm just going to stick it in the corner of my room and magic's going to happen, right? So no, there are actually still on the market lots of purification type of devices that produce a lot of negative ions. That's a fact. They do produce them. However, now I'm not going to drill down into all the finality of this, of how this works. Basically, you have a form of ozone that's also being produced as a byproduct. And long story short is that's going into your lungs and over time not good for you as it continues to build up in the air all of the time, especially if somebody's spending some time in there, in office or at home. So definitely you do have to watch out. Okay, over time it's not good for you. There are some negative ion type generator purifiers that don't produce that. And you have to make sure there's certifications around that and they're not just saying, just making up bullshit claims, okay? Because there's just a lot of products coming from overseas that people white label and are not doing what they claim, okay? Can producing it in your air be helpful for you? Yeah, absolutely it can be. But again, my video is more about this particular device here, which is really just so much more powerful when you're trying to just look for the best outcomes possible. So take a look at, all these different studies here, and it just goes on and on and on. Really, really impressive stuff. There's also some studies here that combine it with other modalities, but you see it's a broad therapeutic efficacy. If you want any information on this particular modality, this type of equipment that I'm showcasing here, it is available for $7,500. It can go down further in price based on if you're getting one or two. There's payment plans involved. I can put you in touch with the actual manufacturer of this device. And again, it's just an amazing, amazing tool for almost any type of business, honestly, in the health space. And, in terms of, again, all the ROI therapeutically that it can deliver, and if you factor that into the price point comparatively to other types of wellness equipment out there, you could definitely make the case that this is one of the better value devices. Like there's certain PEMF, for example, that out there that might be $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. That's super trendy. Lots of people endorse. You may see it at lots of places. Okay. PEMF, if you're not familiar with that, stands for pulse electromagnetic frequency. But when you look at the actual specifications of, say, a trendy brand or two that a lot of people have, okay, in that category, there is a very vast difference of the therapeutic efficacy of something like that versus something like this negative ion generator, okay? And I know it can be very, very confusing, but I'm just kind of making a point here that you can easily overspend, and if you really just don't know how something works, you can spend a lot of money on something that actually has a very narrow therapeutic scope of action. So like some of those really expensive PEMF, depending on what they are, especially like spark gap PEMF, those are very minimal in their effect on the body. Now, to make matters worse, most of these companies, they claim everything and anything, that it's just going to help you with absolutely anything. And that's how they get you on board to spending $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 or whatever it is, or the long-term payment plan. Because I'm like, will it help me with this? Of course it will. Yeah, it's going to help you with absolutely everything, So that's my job, to be like, no, that's actually bullshit. And this is the question to ask the company to basically prove that they're just bullshitting you with just a bunch of marketing claims, okay? That's why I make these videos. So again, for the price point of something like this, this is one of the better devices out there. in terms, or therapeutics. Okay, they can actually deliver real, measurable outcomes. And again, it's backed up by a tremendous amount of studies going back decades. Obviously, it's different administration methods throughout all those studies. Anyways, if you enjoy my video, give me a thumbs up. Make sure to like and subscribe here. I'm available 7 days a week. So if you are interested in this device or how to stack this device and do protocols and things like that, again, just email me anytime, fit4reviews@gmail.com.